Alright, so welcome back. Like I promised, thematic essay from global history, geography, regions. In this case, we're gonna continue working with the January 2014 regions. So let's go. Alright, so the three musts. So for those of you who have seen my first video about the thematic essay, you should be familiar with the three musts, but let's go over them anyway. So the first must is you must know how to organize your essay. Introduction, body paragraphs, and conclusions. If you don't know how to write your essay, you're not going to do well in the regions. And on this regions, you have to do two essays, the thematic essay and the DBQ essay. So you obviously have to know how to organize your essays. Otherwise, you have no business taking that regions. Second must, you must know your history. And this is obvious. You have to know your history, especially when it comes to the thematic essay. And the third must is you must follow the directions for the thematic question. That's very important. You have to read it carefully, and you have to follow what they're asking you. You have to follow the directions. If you follow those three musts, then congratulations, you have no problem passing your regions. These musts are really easy. I call them the three musketeers because these are obvious rules for doing well on this part of the regions. Alright, so let's go. Alright, so we got a thematic essay question, so let's see what they want us to do. Directions: write a well-organized essay that includes an introduction, several paragraphs addressing the task below, and a conclusion. I mean, that should be really straightforward for you guys. I mean, that's how you write any essay. I mean, if your essay doesn't have an introduction or it's missing a conclusion, I mean, you're gonna fail. It's just logic. So they just reminding you right here to write your essay the way an essay is supposed to be written. Alright, so theme: human rights, justice. That's a really good theme. So let's see. It says, at different times in history, individuals have defended human rights using a variety of methods. Their efforts have met with varying degrees of success. So that's a really good theme. When we can do a really good essay about that. So let's read the task at hand. So task: select two individuals, and for each, 1. Describe the historical circumstances that led the individual to defend human rights. 2. Describe the method the individual used to defend human rights. And 3. Discuss the extent to which the individual's effort was successful. Right, so you have to address the task the way they want you to address the task. If they're asking you to select two individuals, you have to select two individuals. And for each of them, you have to address each bullet point that they're giving you. If you're missing, if you're not going to address one of these bullet points, you're going to lose points. It's easy. I mean, they're right there. You can look at it during the Regents exam. It's really easy. And right here, we're giving a list of individuals. You might use any individual from your study of global history and geography. That's very important. This is done so that your guys are not limited to what they're giving you below. So some suggestions you might wish to consider include Bartolomé de las Casas, John Locke, Mary Wollstonecraft, Father Miguel Hidalgo, Emiliano Zapata, Mohandas Gandhi, Father Oscar Romero, Lech Walesa, Nelson Mandela, Aung San Suu Kyi, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, and Dalai Lama. And you're not limited to these suggestions. So if you know another individual who fought for human rights, you can use that individual, but do not select an individual from the United States. So for example, you can't use Martin Luther King Jr. Even though, he did fight, he had fought for the human rights. He is not a person that should be included in a global history essay. I mean, when you guys take the United States history and government regions, then, if you get a thematic question about human rights, you might be able to use Martin Luther King Jr. That's global history. We're focusing on anything that's not part of the United States. Alright, so and guidelines. In your essay, be sure to develop all aspects of the task, support the theme with relevant facts, examples, and details, and use logical and clear path of organization. Once again, they're going to remind you that. They have to remind you twice. so you know, including an introduction and a conclusion. That's beyond a restatement of the theme. Of course, when you look at the theme, you can use the ideas they're giving you at this, right there for your introduction. But you want to go beyond a simple restatement on the theme. Alright, so now that we have familiarized ourselves with what we have to do, we're going to move forward with our thematic essay. Alright, so the next step is to pick two individuals. So I'm going to pick Mohandas Gandhi and Nelson Mandela. Why? Well, they're easier to work with because they're dealt with similar problems. And grouping individuals by theme is a good idea. I could have chosen another individual. I could have chosen, for example, John Locke. But it's much easier to group them by a common theme if you can do it. So Gandhi and Mandela dealt with similar problems, and it's going to be much easier for me to write an essay about them because I won't have to jump back and forth in history when discussing these individuals. But you always want to pick a topic that you're comfortable with and know a lot about. So that's basically how you select your topics in global history, in global history regions, a thematic one. So I'm sure we can do a really good essay about Mohandas Gandhi and Nelson Mandela, so let's go. Alright, so how should we organize our essay? Okay, this is how I'm going to organize my essay. You might do it a little bit differently, and that's okay. As long as your essay is beyond 3 paragraphs, you should be fine. So, introduction, 4 to 7 sentences. Use theme, but go beyond a simple restatement of the theme. And we're going to talk about that, guys. Introduce your individuals without giving away the details, and always use a closing sentence. That's important. So, in my essay, the first body paragraph, 47 sentences, that's going to be about Gandhi. Second body paragraph, 47, I think I'm going to talk about Gandhi. Third body paragraph, 47 sentences, Gandhi. Fourth body paragraph, 47 sentences, Mandela. Fifth body paragraph, 47 sentences, Mandela. Alright, so, and then I'm going to have a conclusion, which is basically a summary of my essay. And a lot of people get confused with conclusion, get stuck on the conclusion, and you shouldn't. I mean, conclusion is one of the easiest parts of your essay. That's because basically that's when you're summarizing the important ideas of your essay. So all you have to do is take a little bit of information from the rest of your essay and kind of put it in one paragraph, which is a conclusion. But avoid something that's, I noticed that it's a big habit today, and avoid this dreaded term, in conclusion, or any variation of this term, such as to conclude. Avoid that. Avoid that. I mean, this is not elementary school. You guys are in high school. avoid that. In a few years you guys are going to be in college, and I promise you, your college professors are not going to like that. So avoid that. You want to break this habit as soon as possible. Avoiding conclusion, because I know it's your last paragraph. I know it's your conclusion. You don't have to tell us it's your conclusion because it's your last paragraph. Alright, so let's get started on our essay. Alright guys, so you have the theme and you have a task in front of you. The reason I put them up there is so you guys know that on an actual Regents exam you have to remember to address the theme and address every aspect of the task. So the theme, human rights and justice. At different times in history, individuals have defended human rights using a variety of methods. Their efforts have met with varying degrees of success. Alright, so now the task. Select 2 individuals, and for each, describe the historical circumstances that led the individual to defend human rights. Describe a method the individual used to defend human rights, and discuss the extent to which the individual's effort was successful. Alright, so let's rock and roll. So, throughout history, there are many individuals who fought hard to defend human rights. And this is very important. You see how I used the term throughout history? And I didn't really copy the theme. The reason that I did that is because I'm writing about history, and anytime you want to write an essay about history, you can use these 2 terms, throughout history. And it's a really good habit to have, is because you can never go wrong with that. I actually used this throughout my high school career and even early on in college. Because you're writing about history, that's a good way to start your essay. Of course, if you're really stuck, you might copy or a theme as your first couple of sentences. I think most teachers would be okay with it. You should check with your school. But you might want to rephrase that instead of simply copying that. This is why I used this. Alright, so let's continue. In order to achieve these goals, they used many different methods with varying degrees of success. So as you can see, I am kind of restating it. One of those individuals was Mohandas Gandhi and his efforts against the colonial British rule in India. Another one was Nelson Mandela, who fought hard against apartheid in South Africa. Both of them gave a great deal of contribution to human history. Alright, so this is a good introduction. It's not a perfect introduction, but it's a good introduction. If you could write something like that on your Regents, you should be fine. Of course, it depends on what kind of question you're given, but generally, what I did here is I introduced 2 individuals, Gandhi and Mandela, without giving away the details. I have a theme, and I have a closing sentence. Great opening, great closing. It's a good sentence. It's a good introduction. Alright, so let's continue. Mohandas Gandhi's impact on human rights was a very significant one. He believed that British colonial rule in India was unfair and led a struggle against it. The British colonial rule followed the standard imperialist strategy of using its colony to benefit the mother country. Not only were the Indians treated as second-class citizens in their own land, their economy was in terrible shape. The British did not care about Indian economy. And Gandhi knew that something needed to be done. Gandhi's method of dealing with the British colonial rule involved nonviolent disobedience. One of the ways in which Gandhi achieved these goals was through Swadeshi policy, which called for boycott of all foreign, mainly British, goods. This caused Britain to lose profit and thus put more pressure on them to cede to his demands. Another method that he used was by encouraging Indian people not to cooperate with the British government and to boycott all British institutions in India. Gandhi's Salt March involved Indian people getting their own salt from seawater. These policies caused a tremendous deal of political pressure on the British. So as you can see, these two paragraphs about Gandhi deal with the first bullet point, because I described the historical circumstances that led him to defend human rights, and I described the methods that he used. Alright, so let's continue. Gandhi's efforts eventually played a role in India becoming an independent country in 1947 with an Indian Independence Act, although not without some concessions. Unfortunately for Gandhi, many Indian Hindus and Muslims could not overcome their differences, which led to a split and the formation of another independent country of Pakistan. Nevertheless, Gandhi's ideas were truly revolutionary and would go on to inspire many human rights leaders around the world. His views on nonviolence continue to inspire people to this day. So, what you see what I did here is I addressed the third bullet point. I discussed the extent to which an individual's effort was successful. And I'm going to do the same thing for Nelson Mandela. Alright, so Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela was another leader who fought hard against the policy of apartheid in South Africa. Apartheid was a system of racial segregation and discrimination imposed by South African whites on black South Africans. Alright, these policies began in 1947 with the coming of power of White Nationalist Party in its general elections. Mandela thought it was unfair that black South Africans would be discriminated against and treated like second-class citizens, and fought hard to stop this injustice. Alright, so what you see here is I did the same thing for Mandela that I did for Gandhi. I described the historical, I started describing historical circumstances that led him to defend human rights. Mandela, with the help of the African National Congress, ANC, started out favoring nonviolence and protests, but moved on to more violent methods once he realized that nonviolence did not bring the necessary results. His views shifted towards violence after the Sharpeville massacre in the 1960 when South African police killed 69 peaceful protesters. He helped set up ANC's armed wing, Umkhonto weSizwe, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but which would carry on a series of attacks against the government until 1990. In 1964, he was jailed for life, but was released in 1990 after a series of negotiations, which led to an eventual abolishment of apartheid in 1991. In 1994, Mandela was elected as the country's first black president. His efforts ended apartheid and improved the standards of living for many black South Africans. So as you can see right here, I described the method the individual used to defend human rights. I addressed that bullet point, and I also discussed the extent to which his efforts was successful. So every single bullet point was addressed, which is what we're looking for. Alright, so now we're just left with a conclusion, which is the easiest part of the essay, because it's really what you do in a conclusion. You're summarizing your essay. You're summarizing the main points of your essay. So this is what I did right here. So over the course of human history, there are many leaders who fought hard to defend human rights. Mohandas Gandhi and Nelson Mandela were two of those leaders. Whether with non-violence or violence, their methods yielded results. The fact that both India and South Africa are now democratic and independent countries have a lot to do with their efforts. Their struggle inspired many human rights leaders around the world and helped shape modern human history. Alright, done. Alright, so as you can see, that wasn't that difficult, but to do really well on this essay, you have to know your history. Now, you might have seen a lot of those fancy dates, fancy numbers that I put up there in my essay. To do well in this essay, you really don't need to know a lot of those numbers. It helps, of course, if you know the dates, if you know important dates, important numerical information related to history, it helps. But the main thing that you have to know is the history behind the question that you're being asked, you're going to be asked on the Regents. So it's not that difficult. It's really not. And I hope that this was helpful. Final tips. Please don't use these 3 things in your essay. You know, don't start your essays with, in my essay I'm gonna write about such and such, you know. Just don't do that. Or this essay will be about, don't do that either. That's another no. No, no, and don't end your essay with, in conclusion. That's another no. A third no. And you have to know how to organize your essay. That should be, I mean, you have to know how to do it. Even if you're not completely sure about the topic that you're going to get on your Regents, you know, let's say you get a topic and you don't know that much about it. If you know how to organize your essay, your grade should be bumped a little bit higher, because, you know, as teachers, we love reading papers that are neat, that are very neat. And these papers have to be organized. And let's see, what else? Each paragraph should be in a range of 4 to 7 sentences. 4 is an absolute minimum. 4 is an absolute minimum. So 4 is acceptable if you have 4 sentences, but they have to be really good sentences. Normally try to aim for 5 through 7. 5 through 7, yeah, but sometimes, you know, if you gotta have 4, what you're gonna do? It's 4. But they should be really good as sentences. So aim for 4 to 6 paragraphs, but again, it depends on the type of questions that you're gonna get. Sometimes you might have to write more than 6 paragraphs. Don't write a 3-paragraph essay, because that's going to really ruin your grade. Don't do that. And final thought is, this essay is not difficult. A thematic, a lot of people don't like thematic essays, but they're really easy and you can do it. But of course you have to know your history. If you don't know your history, then of course you're not going to do well on this essay. If you don't know how to organize your essay, then you're not going to do well on this essay. If you know how to do both of these things, then you're probably going to do well on this essay. Alright, so hope it was helpful, and good luck in your Regents, guys.